Well, hi everyone. As this is a test, maybe you could comment if Ardesh, indeed, Helen, welcome. As this is a test, if you can hear me, maybe you could, I don't know, if you can make a comment. Receive wisdom is with this kind of thing, which I've never done a live broadcast before, that you're supposed to give people a little bit of time to turn up. What they might call pagan standard time. We're all on pagan standard time. I'm kind of assuming that people who are into Hinduism and Tantra in the West and all over the world, in fact, would kind of more or less identify as pagans as well. Same sort of thing, pagan standard time. Anyway, so Helen says she can hear me loud and clear. Well, that's good. Thank you very much. I'll leave the music on in the background, which is a playlist, and the visuals are okay. I had it back to front just now. I wonder why the screen was all black. And it's because the camera was pointing into the thing. I can hear you. Hello, Soldier. Very nice to. I wish I could hear you all, but it would probably be too chaotic if we had mixed sound. But maybe for another time. So I'm just waffling at the moment to kind of fill the air time at the beginning to give people a chance to arrive. I haven't actually got a lot planned for this, as it's a test version, so I'm open for feedback and everything. But having said that, I'm kind of quite a talkative person, so even though I can't, I tend to kind of talk a lot anyway, so I don't. So I might do that, but I'll try and stick to the point. So the reason why I'm doing it, I don't really know why I'm how I got into this, doing this broadcast. My idea was I posted some stuff. I posted a kind of what would you call it? Almost like a manifesto, because on this AMOOKOS Facebook group, which is quite a big group really, there's quite a lot of people on it, as you know, right? I've lost count now, there's a lot. There'd be more. I mean, I'm a bit slower, I'm one of the moderators, and I tend to sort of, I can be a bit slow letting people on, mainly because I'm trying to avoid, obviously as everybody is, and make sure that the people who want to join really do want to join and not just there to advertise sunglasses or something like that, occupational hazards. But I think we've got maybe 400 or 500 people on the list from all over the world. So, which is kind of pretty good. But I don't know what we do really. uh, I'm in a sort of in the peace movement. I was very involved with the peace movement, which got me in a certain amount of trouble. Um, they used to have a thing that you're in affinity groups. I quite like the idea of affinity groups. That we're an affinity group, really, a group of friends who share a particular interest in probably in magic and the occult, but primarily from a Indian point of view, I guess. But even 500-600 people, there could be. I mean, there are rumors. There were rumors a few years ago that somewhere in Russia there were 20,000 of AMOOKOS members. That people had this kind of chain letter had spread out, and lots and lots of people have been initiated. So I don't know. I suppose you could make a distinction between being initiated into the Tantra tradition, really, which is what does that entail? I mean, it's the initiation. Obviously, in order to practice, strictly speaking, in order to practice in the tantric tradition, you're supposed to have an initiation. So, by some kind of accident of history, I suppose you'd have to say. This group of people, AMOOKOS, and starting back in the 70s and everything like that, we have this kind of line of initiation that between India and the Western occult world, really. It's kind of disputed, it has to be said. I don't worry too much about this. There's quite a lot of expert people involved with the group, actually, and they're pretty informative, And they say in Tibet we probably wouldn't get or Nepal we wouldn't get away. It'd be much stricter. There'd probably be certificates, and you have a much stricter lineage. In India, things are a little bit more of a grey area. So we kind of exist in that, and in a way, strictly speaking, our line of initiation is what can I say? It's supposed to have died out. Hundreds of years ago, right? So someone pointed this out to me. Some scholar pointed this out to me. He was okay about it, though. I mean, maybe, who knows? So, if our line of initiation through Dadaji, if that is true, which I don't see why it shouldn't be true, if that really exists, then we're actually that's quite special. It means a sort of a line of initiation that is supposed to have died out in the historical period still exists, and it's kind of passed to the West, as it were. I mean, this is pretty controversial stuff, but I don't care, really, in lots of ways. If I thought about it, maybe I'd kind of look into it. Anyway, so you have the line of initiation, I'm saying. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything else. So what? You get the initiation, you can practice, but so what? As the books are there, the text, we have a sacred text that's very, very old, but there's no kind of, I suppose there's an expectation if you're into the Western occult world that there'll be some sort of group work, right? Especially if you're into Tantra and stuff like that. You kind of have this vision, if you've read the books and the history, that there's going to be a kind of group that that's practicing this stuff. All the mythology seems to allude to that. And I suppose you'd say that's a reasonable human nature, really, to desire fellowship, to desire to meet with other initiates and other practitioners of your religion, if you want to call it that, and to practice together. But that's obviously even in India, I think some of these things are a bit kind of uncertain. The tradition is kind of in crisis, and But sort of worldwide, when there is a big world and there's so much of us spread all over the world, the chances are you're not going to be, it's not going to be available to you. Um, I should say from my own experience, back in the 90s, when I was first initiated in Britain back a while now, back in the 1980s, there were groups. I had a group. I've still got a group. I've got a, you know, in a sense, a sort of astral group now. But we for a while back in the 1980s, a whole bunch of us used to meet and do rituals and stuff, and we used to go to other people's rituals, and there were other rituals around. So what I'm getting round to saying is that obviously people post on the AMOOKOS list saying what is there a group, are there other people, are there actually any other members, right, of this group that I could go and practice with or whatever. And I have to say it just depends. Mostly no. Right. Mostly not. Hi Charlotte, welcome to the discussion. I kind of started, but I know that you have to kind of allow people, but I don't know, I probably haven't said anything that I'm not that I won't repeat about 50 times anyway, in my usual way. So recently a couple of people posted, oh, is there a group, are there other people I can go and learn from? Learn, say, put it that way, you want to learn, find people to come and learn the tradition and practice some of the things together which imply, because the practice implies that some of the stuff is some of it is very intellectual, I think we have to agree, right? Some of it is very, which is kind of solitary, right? It's aimed at the solitary practitioner reading lots of quite complicated books, some of which are, you know, quite interesting, but sometimes they can be a bit boring or whatever. But so the intellectual side of it lends itself, but some other bits of it. So I suppose I'm thinking, how could we facilitate that? I tend to kind of, maybe you think I'm being flippant when people say, is there a group in such and such a place? And I say, well, no, but why don't you start one? And I kind of, they probably think I'm taking the piss or something, but I'm not really. I kind of, because that's what I did. That's what I did in the 1980s, that there weren't a lot of groups. I mean, in a way, there is not as many, in all traditions, and whatever tradition of magic you practice, there won't be as many temples and groups as you kind of hope there will be. There's always room for more. In a way, that people have to start these things, and I know not everybody has the kind of the temperament for that kind of thing, but I suppose I've got that temperament, so I, not being finding a group that I was able to join or couldn't find one, not in this country, I just thought I'd start my own. You know, it seemed, maybe, hi Brian, it may be, and hi Marco, maybe it seems a bit pretentious really to kind of start your own group, but I kind of think maybe if you're into magic, and I know I keep sort of overlapping between magic and Tantrism, but as I say, my USP is that the unique selling point, or my view is that, to use an Indian term, is that you know, you should just do these things really. You probably should, you're never gonna be, I don't think any religious person ever feels completely authentic and authorized to do what they do. You always have to kind of make a, probably everybody has self-doubt, but something about their abilities, and they're always looking for someone who's cleverer than them, like the guru, or is more authorized than they are to kind of to allow these things to happen. And a lot of what magic in the West is kind of, some of the lessons it's made is that maybe you didn't have to censor yourself like that so much. Pete Carroll always used to say, the chaos magician, maybe people should just start thinking of themselves as magicians, not as people who are going to become magicians one day. They should just adopt the God form of the magician and just be it. So I'm kind of doing that. So anyway, for those just joined, I'm talking a little bit about the I'm just filling the time to in this experiment by just talking a little bit um, about the thing that I posted uh, on the AMOOKOS group as a kind of prospectus, if you like. The sort of work that people could do, in my experience, right? And my view of magical work in the tantric tradition, and I've been in AMOOKOS for a fairly long time, uh, is probably different to everybody else's, and most people mostly don't always agree with me, but they're always very nice to me about it. But they have their view and I have my view. Hi there, hi from New Zealand. Very good. I suppose this is good. You see, I know loads of you people from, just from whatever, but I think maybe there is a gap in the, a fellowship, and of maybe we could use the internet and virtual resources a little bit more to connect, and we underestimate the value of that kind of thing, of members of AMOOKOS actually talking about the rituals they're doing, if they are doing it, and talking about the things they're learning about and communicate that to other people. So in the prospectus that I put down with the idea that people might use that to start a group, and it had a particular quite renegade I suppose point of view that reflected completely my obsessions in the best possible sense. I suggested in that if a group of you were to get together, there's guidance there on the sort of practices that I think will work amongst a group of people, which is not what you'd expect really. It's quite sort of physical stuff. It's not intellectual. There is an intellectual component. It's quite experiential. It's quite aimed at trance and dancing and ecstasy. These are more appropriate things to do in a bigger group of people. I think this is my opinion. And the other thing that one would need is you probably do know, if you're working in the AMOOKOS tradition. I'm saying hello to Amrita Nath in New Zealand. Very nice to have you here. You probably do need to know a little bit of intellectual stuff. It's like Govinda, the sage, said that you didn't really have to know a lot of intellectual stuff. You just needed to know one mantra, which is Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, which is a fantastic mantra actually, and I've spent a lot of time with the Hare Krishnaites. But Chaitanya was a very, very clever person, and you can never completely avoid knowing something, and you probably do want to know a little bit about the intellectual tradition of India, the history. So there's probably room for us to provide history lectures. I can do it. I'm qualified actually to do that sort of stuff, but loads of other people that I meet from day to day are much more qualified than I am, and they're quite nice to me. I could probably persuade them to come and do a lecture. So I kind of thought that, so then someone says, well, go and do the lecture then. So that's maybe what I will do, right? I will try. This is an experiment, and if I don't get completely shot down in flames, I'll try and repeat this at least every 2 weeks, so we have a kind of, and it might not always be me, although it could always be me, because I got a fair amount of things to talk about that I like to talk about. Hi, yeah. You said, Charlotte says yes please to lectures. Well, there you go, not too long, but yeah, just to learn what our tradition is. That's how I got into it in the first place. I must admit that I was talking to someone before I did this, and I said I was going to talk about, it comes out back to front on the camera, but it says the Bhagavad Gita, right? You see. And Brian says he also welcomes the lecture. Well, as I say, this is this is what we do. So for me, right, I would say that great scholar of this tradition is Mircea Eliade, and he wrote that it's kind of an adventure. There's no bigger adventure for Western consciousness than that trip from the West to the East. The discovery, he says, the discovery of the East by Western consciousness is one of the greatest intellectual adventures that you can think of. And that is true, I think. If you look at it that way, it's a kind of journey into a very, very interesting belief system that actually isn't alien. That's the weird thing. We already were connected to it, but that's been forgotten. It's one of the interests of mine, is to show that we really are connected to that. But the journey of discovery of our roots, because it's our roots as well, even though we're from the West or from New Zealand or from America or whatever, there's still intellectual history has roots there in the Near East and in India. So that was Eliade's thing. So when I was thinking how I started myself on that journey, and a few things started me off, and the thing that really got me, I think, reading somewhere, maybe it was in the Theosophical Society. If you're an occultist, you kind of end up reading, and you're on a journey, you're on a spiritual journey, and maybe you end up reading Blavatsky or something like that. And a lot of the time they talk about a book called the Bhagavad Gita, right? Back to front. I don't know why. There's a reason to do with the technology, but I can't fix it now. Someone says, well, why as a tantric? See, I think the lectures should give you an initiated tantric version of these historical ideas, not an orthodox one, because tantrics are supposed to have a special view, a special insight into not just their own tradition, but into everybody else's tradition. Which, if you think about it, that's also the same for Western magicians. Western magicians, if you push them, they'll say they understand everybody else's religions almost better than they do. Those practitioners, I mean, it sounds a bit much really, but they kind of have a view. And that's the tantric view as well. They claim to understand Hinduism and all the other people's religions in India better than the Brahmins. Because they have this kind of direct insight behind the scenes. So you come to this book, the Bhagavad Gita. I posted yesterday on the group the film version, the Peter Brook film version of Mahabharata, which is a very long, the longest epic poem in history, really, which tells the complete history of humanity. Not just India, it's of the human race, right? How we started is rather remarkable, and he's kind of boiled it all down to a drama that lasts 6 hours now. When they did it on the stage, it lasted 11 hours, but now as a film version, it lasts about 6 hours. And that's the story of this enormous conflict that happened before we became what we are now. And at some stage, if you're watching that, there's it's all the way through. It's building up to this great battle that takes place, and you know, having 5 hours into the thing, right? We know there's a big fight coming, right? And it's going to be incredibly violent. And in fact, you know from the story that almost everybody is going to be killed. And just at the point in which the battle's supposed to start, Arjuna, who's the warrior, the quintessential warrior, the origin of martial arts in some ways, even in China. Although, you know, the historians are going to go nuts if I say that. He says he doesn't want to fight. He looks at all the battles, people are lined up, and all his relatives in both sides, and he says, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to kill all my friends and relatives, and I don't want all my friends and relatives to die. So that's kind of remarkable. It's quite remarkable that this book is so, that Krishna who we think of as the god of love, says, well, don't really worry about it, you know, just kill them. Just kill, you're a warrior, and in a sense he says something that we relate to even as a tantric, which is that you just follow, you do your true will. You do the thing that you were put on this earth for, which is a kind of, it's not what you think it is, it's your true will. And he says to Arjuna, you're the quintessential warrior. Your function in life, in a way, is not to talk philosophy, but is to act in a non-attached way and follow a particular journey, mystical journey in a way. Or it's not a mystical journey for him. It's got a mystical component. The whole thing does at the end, but he's saying do your will, essentially, as he says to him. He also says to him, which you might, even though this is a very orthodox text, right? And you think more I'm saying it's an incredibly violent text, right? It's a book of violence. It's a book that advocates going out there and slaughtering people in the most horrendous way. But somehow or other, that's not the way it's ever been interpreted. Somehow or other, people understand that's not quite what it means. That when texts, and we have a lot of texts like this in Tantra, in magic and everything, when they say to you one thing, they may even say go out and kill or something. Well, they appear to say that, but really they don't. They mean something else. There's a mystical meaning behind that, which for Arjuna or for any of us is this question of being non-attached, and also of following your true will, wherever that might be. That's the message that people get out of that. And in fact, the text is about devotion. And the force, it's about the power of love in its own way. And the power of love and the emotion is something, is a theme that does get worked through in Tantra and in Hinduism as well, right? We're not the only ones with that. I mean, this is controversial in a way, that this idea that bhakti, that devotion to things, the power of the emotion is very important in the practice of magic. I mean, tantrics are magicians as well. You can give it another name, abhacharya or whatever, but essentially Tantra probably also means, like yoga, it means kind of magic. And to do magic, you sometimes you're not attached, and sometimes it's the power of the emotions that you're harnessing in some way for a higher aim. Anyway, I think all of these themes are kind of discussed in the Bhagavad Gita. Or at least I think if you're going to try and understand the culture from which Tantra comes, right, derives, if you want to understand the context, then for me, this was the first book I had to read, and I think it's true. I think everybody has to read this book, right? Or it's not a particularly long one. This is, it looks really thick there, right? Because, but it's got a huge commentary. This one was translated by R.C. Zena, right, who is a professor of Sanskrit here at Oxford, and in the 1960s. And in the 1960s, they used to do a lot of LSD in Oxford, right? It was the centre. Oxford was the centre for LSD in kind of practically the whole world, really. If you read Howard Marks's High Times and all that. And R.C. Zena was the professor. He apparently used to spend most of his time completely tripping on LSD. But at the same time, he used to write books telling people, don't do LSD. So he wrote a very good book called Mysticism, Sacred and Profane, in which he tried to say that taking drugs for mysticism was profane. But he had some experience of that. I mean, you couldn't say that he didn't experiment, because he took a lot of drugs himself. What does that say? Go Oxford, loads of laugh. Well, there you go. Yeah, not anymore, I don't think. This is in the 1960s when Oxford was a hip place. Anyway, but he wasn't he didn't do, you know, he wasn't so stoned that he didn't manage to write quite a good book really. So this is his book. I'm not sure if you'll find. Yeah, no, I think it's quite a good translation. It's quite a sort of metaphysical translation. But anyway, you can find loads of this. But this would be your. For me, this was the first Indian text that I ever read, apart from sort of secondary stuff that you read. And I think you can go backwards to the beginning of time through this book, and you can go forwards into Hinduism. You can see Tantrism is in here. The practical aspects of how to do yoga and things. I mean, practicing in the work that I suggest for the temple. There's quite a lot of practical stuff there. You know, it's all stuff that we never do. It's all dance and singing and chanting and shaking and all these sorts of stuff that's quite sort of bhakti type practice in lots of ways for a group. I think that's what you do. But sometimes you have to do a little bit of yoga. But most of the yoga you do is, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, you only need about 2 postures in yoga, and those are just good ones for sitting. You need to be able to sit comfortably and easily. That's what Krishna says to Arjuna, because Arjuna decides he wants to practice a little bit of meditation at some point. And Krishna says, "Oh, you don't need anything too complicated. Just this." Which is weird, because obviously in our tradition, the founders of our tradition, but back in 1,000 years ago maybe, they created some really tortuous yoga postures. Goraknath's posture in yoga is really hard work. I mean, I have got no chance. But people who are really bendy and good at yoga, even they say that some of those Goraknath, and the founder of our order, our tradition, Matsyendranath, is there are a couple of yoga poses that he invented. So we probably invented Hatha yoga, you know, the physical yoga, but really you don't need all that. You only need the sitting poses. But maybe they kind of liked yoga and all the rest. Actually, I don't know if you noticed that if you watch the beginning of the Mahabharata, which is that film I posted yesterday, the very first story is of where Vyasa talks about his parents, the baby being found in the belly of a fish. And of course that's kind of our tradition as well. Because Matsyendranath means a fish, or a fisherman, or someone who found stuff, or Meenanath, who's something from a fish. So he either was a fisherman, which means he went to sea and he met people from other parts of the world, or he literally caught fish, which is a very, very taboo occupation for a scholar in India. Or maybe like in Lord of the Rings, you know, that bit where they find the ring of power in the belly of a fish. Gollum finds it in the belly, which, you know, that's a very old myth pattern. I mean, that is an Indo-European myth thing, the idea that from the belly of a fish, secret knowledge comes. You find it in Egypt as well. It's more than Indo-European, that the fish, the phallus of Osiris, is eaten by a fish. All of these traditions in my crazy world, they kind of overlap really. Anyway, that's what I wanted to recommend for now. Or maybe if I get some feedback, I'll do a bit more. I'll go a bit more into that. I was told, look, my book's going to come out back to front. It's going to be Tantra Sadhana. So if you haven't got it, I mean, I'm always very modest, I think, embarrassed about the things about. But as I think it's okay, really. This book of mine, I think it does kind of introduce some important themes, and I might go through some of that in future lectures if history lectures if people are interested, and say where I dreamt up these crazy ideas from. Anyway, so if you haven't got it, I do recommend it. It's not going to break the bank, that book, and you can get a cheap um, version. And next time, I think probably half an hour is probably enough, isn't it? But if I did half an hour every 2 weeks, it'd probably take us for the rest of our lifetime to finish the entire Hindu intellectual tradition, because that's just the Hindu stuff. We've got the Hindu intellectual stuff, which is the religious and the philosophical stuff. We've got the tantric stuff, which includes the medical and the magical. So there's plenty of material to talk about, and you can feedback and give me questions if you like. But I'm kind of just trying to draw us together a little bit as a group, and share something and help people to kind of mix together. Charlotte said, would weekly be better? Could you really take it every week? Oh my God. Maybe. What? Half an hour a week? Possibly. Someone else suggested such a thing. I don't know. I'll think about it. I might try it in 2 weeks' time, and then see what happens after that. But also, maybe I can talk someone else into having a go as well, and then we can get a few more people here, and whatever. Anyway, that's more or less the end of the test for today. And I'll talk to people later. You can tell me whether the technology's working. I'm just doing this on a mobile phone, actually. I tried about 3 good people, and yeah, isn't it? It's funny, isn't it? Yeah, you're doing good. And I say, if when you think about this, you think about subjects that you really like to talk about, or really like. I'm the one who's going to do the talking. That's true. But issues that you find complex or obscure. But the idea is that I'm just going to give a general background. By the end of it, you'll know. I'm going to tell you things you probably know already, but I can't know that, can I? But I'll give you it from my point of view, which is, I don't know. It's I respect myself. I have an intuition. I have a certain insight, and one of my insights, I have to say, because I post this thing on the thing called the Kaula Ritual Year. Of the one interesting thing, this idea of a cycle, which I don't think it was very well known that tantrics work to a ritual cycle through the year and through the month. And then I had a certain amount of resistance to that at first, but I think I've kind of, I wouldn't care anyway. I still think it's a good idea, but I think now it's proved that it's from the textual tradition. This is a forgotten aspect of Tantrism that needs to be revived. So I might talk about that as well, and some of the festivals as they come up. Anyway, so I'm going to sign off now, and I'll see some of you in the flesh, I'm sure, in the flesh, or in the next life, or on the internet or whatever. But yeah, thank you so much for coming and participating and feeding back. And I'll see you next time. I'll turn the music up now.
शृण्वन्नोतिभिः सीदसादनम् शुक्लाम्बरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये।